Ladies and gentlemen, unattached energy fuels transformation. When your energy is no longer bound by the constant pull of external demands, it begins to move differently. It is no longer scattered, no longer drained by the invisible threads of obligation, compromise, and emotional negotiation. It becomes concentrated, focused, and available for the work of inner change. In this state, what was once spent on maintaining relationships or managing others' expectations is redirected inward, feeding the processes of growth that require both attention and strength. To understand this, imagine the way water behaves. When it flows freely down a river, it spreads out, touching everything along its path. But when it is contained, directed, and channeled, it gains force enough to carve stone, power turbines, and reshape landscapes. Human energy works in much the same way. When it is constantly given away in fragments to the demands of a partner, the weight of social obligations, the quiet but persistent pressure to meet someone else's needs, it loses the intensity required for deep transformation. But when it is held within, not in selfish hoarding but in mindful preservation, it gains the power to reshape the self from the inside out. Unattached energy does not mean emotional coldness. It means reclaiming the parts of yourself that you have unconsciously handed over to others. It is the choice to step back from the constant reflex to give, to please, to manage, or to fix, and instead to sit with your own inner landscape. In doing this, you begin to see the areas of your life that have long been neglected, not because they were unimportant, but because your energy was too divided to address them. When your energy is unattached, it naturally turns toward creation. You find yourself drawn to pursuits that have been postponed for years, projects you once dismissed as impossible, dreams you left to gather dust because you believed you lacked the time, the focus, or the emotional space. Without the silent drain of constant external demands, you discover that you are capable of far more than you imagined. This is not a sudden burst of willpower, but a steady, sustainable current that pushes you forward day by day. Transformation requires more than desire. It requires resources. Energy is one of the most essential resources you have. When it is tied up in unresolved conflicts, in the endless loops of trying to be enough for someone else, in the constant adjustments to fit into another person's rhythm, there is little left for you. But when those attachments loosen, when you allow yourself to be whole without being tethered, you find that energy begins to return to you. It comes back like a tide, slow at first, then stronger, until it becomes a force you can work with consciously. In this state, you begin to see possibilities where before you only saw limits. You start to experiment with change-altering routines, exploring new ways of thinking, engaging in practices that nourish rather than deplete you. Small shifts build on each other, and because your energy is no longer being siphoned away, these shifts take root. They become habits, then foundations, and eventually, they transform the way you live entirely. Unattached energy also sharpens awareness. Without the emotional static of constantly managing relationships, you can hear the subtler signals of your own intuition. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer clouded by the fear of how someone else will react. You begin to act from alignment rather than appeasement. This clarity allows you to move more decisively, to commit to paths that once seemed uncertain, and to release those that no longer serve you. There is also a deep sense of sovereignty in holding your energy this way. You are no longer defined by how much you give to others, but by how consciously you choose where to place your attention and effort. This is not isolation, it is intentionality. You recognize that transformation is not a passive event, it is an active process fueled by the energy you have reclaimed and directed with purpose. When your energy is unattached, every step you take carries more weight. Each choice becomes more deliberate, each action more aligned with the person you are becoming. You are no longer pulled in directions that weaken you. Instead, you move in ways that strengthen you, building momentum toward a life that reflects your true nature rather than one shaped by the constant compromise of attachment. And in that momentum, transformation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. From the earliest moments of life, A child learns that the world responds differently to certain parts of who they are. Some parts draw warmth, smiles, and praise. Others provoke silence, frowns, or correction. The child does not yet have the capacity to question why this is so. They only know that some expressions of themselves seem safe, and others are dangerous to reveal. To navigate this invisible map of approval and disapproval, they begin to construct something, an outer shell, a version of themselves carefully shaped to meet the expectations of those around them. This is the mask. It is made of smiles when they feel sadness, obedience when they feel rebellion, politeness when they feel the urge to speak freely. It is a work of art built for survival. At first, the mask may be worn lightly. The child still remembers the joy of running freely without worrying how they appear, the thrill of saying something purely because it is true. But over time, the mask becomes more permanent. It fits snugly against the skin of identity. It is reinforced by every nod of approval, every moment when the mask prevents conflict, every reward for playing the part well. Meanwhile, the parts of the self that do not fit into the mask are pushed inward. These exiled aspects do not disappear. They live beneath the surface, waiting. They may carry intense emotions, anger, grief, longing, or qualities that were misunderstood and unwelcome, such as imagination, boldness, or sensitivity. These qualities retreat into the shadows, and the child learns to present only the acceptable version of themselves to the world. As the years pass, the mask becomes so practiced that it is no longer just for others. It is worn in solitude too. Even in the privacy of one's own mind, thoughts are censored, feelings dismissed, impulses rationalized away. The person begins to identify with the mask so completely that the true self becomes almost a stranger. It is not forgotten entirely, but remembered only in brief flashes in dreams, in sudden surges of emotion, in the strange restlessness that arises when life feels too neat and controlled. The mask is not inherently evil. It serves a purpose. It protects the self from rejection, judgment, and the chaos of conflict. It allows the person to navigate social structures without constant friction. But the cost of relying on it entirely is the slow starvation of authenticity. The mask seeks harmony with the world, but the true self seeks harmony with the soul. When the two are out of balance, the individual feels a kind of quiet despair, the sense that they are living a life that is somehow not their own. In the mask's world, value comes from performance. Approval is earned through doing and becoming, never simply being. In the true self's world, value is innate, untouched by achievement or failure. The two speak different languages, and the longer the mask is worn, the harder it becomes to translate between them. There are moments when the true self tries to break through. Perhaps it appears in an unguarded laugh that feels strangely liberating, or in a sudden refusal to agree with something that feels wrong. Sometimes it comes as a deep longing for something undefined, a pull toward a life that feels more alive, more raw, more real. But such moments can also be frightening. They threaten the order the mask has worked so hard to maintain. And so, the mask tightens its hold, smoothing over the cracks where the truth tries to seep out. This tension between the mask and the true self can last a lifetime if it remains unnoticed. People may succeed, be admired, and outwardly seem fulfilled, all while feeling a hollow space within them. They may believe this emptiness means they need to work harder, achieve more, or change something external. In reality, what they are missing is not outside of them, it is the part of themselves they abandoned to wear the mask. The true self does not resent the mask. It understands why it was created, but it waits patiently, knowing that real peace comes only when it is allowed to stand in the light again. It does not demand perfection. It asks only for honesty. It does not require rebellion. It requires recognition. And though it may have been pushed into the shadows for years, it remains intact, holding the fullness of what a person is meant to be. The mask may protect, but it cannot nourish. The true self may be hidden, but it cannot be destroyed. Between these two forces lies the quiet drama of a life, the dance between survival and authenticity, between who the world taught us to be and who we have always been beneath the surface. True love begins when validation ends. For as long as we are chasing recognition, what we call love is only a mask of dependency. Many people enter relationships not seeking to share themselves, but to complete themselves, to be healed by another's gaze, to find in another's approval the sense of worth they cannot grant themselves. This dynamic may feel like passion, but beneath it lies fragility. When love is confused with validation, it becomes conditional, dependent on whether the other continues to admire, to praise, to choose. The moment validation falters, the illusion of love begins to crumble. True love is of a different nature. It does not thrive on constant reassurance, nor does it demand endless proof. It exists beyond the hunger to be affirmed. Love that is bound to validation is like a flame that consumes quickly and dies in smoke. But love that is free of validation is like a steady fire, enduring and warm, because it is not fueled by insecurity. To love without needing validation is to love with freedom, to allow the other to exist as they are, not as a source of continual approval. Validation, when it dominates, turns a relationship into a performance. Each partner becomes both actor and audience, endlessly watching for signs of approval. The smallest gestures are interpreted not as expressions of genuine connection, but as signals of value. Did they notice me? Did they compliment me? Did they make me feel chosen? Over time, this creates tension, for the relationship becomes less about loving the other and more about securing a fragile sense of self. True love begins only when this performance ends, when two people no longer need to prove themselves to one another, but can rest in the simplicity of being together. The journey toward love that is free from validation begins within. A person who cannot accept themselves will always hunger for another's gaze to fill the void. They will mistake attention for affection and praise for devotion. But the one who has embraced themselves, both their light and their shadow, no longer depends on another to constantly affirm their worth. This self-acceptance creates the ground for genuine love, because it allows one to meet another as a whole being rather than a half searching for completion. When the hunger for validation subsides, love emerges as a gift rather than a demand. True love does not ask, "Do you see me as worthy?" It asks, "Can I see you as you are?" Without the shadow of validation, love becomes less about being admired and more about the act of deeply recognizing another soul. This recognition is not tied to appearances, successes, or performances. It is rooted in the essence of the person, the unique spirit that remains even when masks fall away. Such love can withstand silence, distance, or imperfection because it is not tied to the fragile need to be constantly reassured. When validation no longer governs the relationship, space opens for freedom and authenticity. Each partner can express themselves honestly without fear of losing approval. Differences are not threats, and vulnerability is not a risk of rejection, but an offering of truth. Love that is free of validation does not shrink when flaws are revealed, because it is not sustained by illusion. It grows stronger in honesty, finding intimacy in the acceptance of imperfection. This form of love is rare because it requires inner strength. To love without validation is to risk being unseen in the way the ego desires. It is to release the need for applause and allow love to exist quietly, steadily, without spectacle. It is to see the other not as a mirror of your worth, but as a mystery to be cherished. It is not glamorous in the way validation can feel, but it is profound. It brings peace where before there was restlessness, and depth where before there was only performance. True love begins when validation ends, because only then does the relationship cease to be a transaction of approval. It becomes a meeting of two beings who do not need one another to survive but choose to walk together. In this space, love is no longer fragile, no longer dependent on the shifting tides of praise or recognition. It is rooted in acceptance, nourished by freedom and sustained by truth.